right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's so good to see everybody here, and I always chuckle when I'm in these spaces and like nobody wants to sit up front. It stands true always. So my name is Erin Upchurch, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm here today to have this conversation about transformative justice as a framework for social work practice. I'll give you just a brief bit about me just so you, I guess, don't have to be like, why are you talking about this? I am a graduate of Mandel School, class of 2009, and this is actually my first time back up here since, not in Cleveland, but to the college. I have been a social work practitioner for, I'm going on my 24th year. Done a little bit of everything from, my goodness, foster care, child welfare, child services. I worked in politics for about 3 years, some statewide organizing. Did things around reproductive rights, LGBTQ justice, and worked in community mental health as a clinical director. So I've done the direct practice, done the macro practice, really got engaged in the political and the advocacy sphere. That still is a big part of my life. But when I came here to Case to get my master's degree, I was working in HIV at the time. And this is like early 2000, and I was still a young baby social worker, still thinking, you know, I'm gonna change the world, I'm gonna do all these great things. I think I've done a few great things, haven't changed the entire world, and you know, we can talk about that later. But the thing that inspired me to get my master's degree and specifically come to Case was working with consumers who are living with HIV and AIDS. And I just remember this one meeting, and there was a table, it was like an advisory committee meeting, consumer advisory meeting. And they were making decisions about how federal dollars, federal Ryan White dollars, were going to be used locally here in the state of Ohio and in Columbus. And I had never seen anything like that before. I'd never seen a community come together and actually participate and have a say in the direction of their care, feedback, and to be just really a part of their lives in a way that was active and engaged and held their dignity. And I thought, oh, I want to be a part of that. That really resonated with me. And my concentration was called Social and Community Development. I believe now it is Community Practice for Social Change, which I think is so beautiful. And I love that that's what I want to do, and that's what I look at my practice as. And so throughout the years and being engaged in that type of work, I hit up against the same things that we probably all do who are doing this type of work, and that is working through systems that really weren't built for people, right? They're built for systems. They're built for buildings. They're built for institutions, but I don't know if they're created for the people that need them. And so that is what has kind of guided me into this work of transformative justice, which we're going to dive into. But I do believe there's a way that we can make change. I know there is. I've seen it. It's slow work. It can be painful, and it's really beautiful as a way to step in and to really commit to our values. I also want to share, I'm a parent to two young people, young adults actually. My daughter's 19. She is at Capital University in Columbus, and she just decided to be a social worker. And I was so excited, but I couldn't encourage it. I was like, oh, that's a great idea. But like, I was really happy that she chose that because I believe so much in the profession, and I love being a social worker. Everything I do in my work is, I always start with, I'm a social worker and this is my role, because I need people to know that social workers, we are everywhere. It's not just children's services, right? It's not just mental health, it's not just therapy, although I've been in private practice and I've been a therapist and I've done all those things, but there's more to us. And so I feel very proud to be a social worker, and I'm very happy that she wants to do that, and I'm trying to keep my mouth shut and not tell her what to do all the time. My wife is back there and is shaking her head no, because I don't do a good job at it. And then I have a 21-year-old son, my darling son. We are so similar, and he is at Tiffin University. I don't know what he's gonna do, but he wants to make places beautiful for people, so he's looking at environmental psychology. So a lot of my lessons, and I think this is how it's supposed to be in the world, have really come from being a parent to 2 young people and raising them in this world. Most of this work and my own personal work has come through trying to be the best parent that I can for them. So my wife and I own a business. I was going to call it a consulting company, but it's so much more than that. It's called the Ohio Rest Collective. The REST stands for Restorative Equity Through Sustainable Transformation. And it's multiple parts, but the foundation of it is around rest. And as humans, as individuals, we have nervous systems, right? We know about the fight, flight, or freeze. We know our trauma responses, our adaptive strategies, which we're going to talk about very soon. And we know that not only do individuals have a nervous system, but so do communities and organizations. And so through that premise and that framework, and through this lens of transformative justice, we work with individuals, communities, and organizations in their relationship with rest. So getting out of fight or flight mode and basically making decisions and doing the work from a place of thriving and not surviving. And it makes such a big difference. And we do the rest practices. I'm a yoga practitioner, I'm a somatic practitioner and educator. And so also tying that those skills and those tools in so that organizations, bigger picture, and individuals, smaller picture, get to experience that. And then they can be more grounded and make those decisions. And then we can engage in harm reduction and repair. But this quote is one that really stood up for us as I don't need you to praise me for my resilience. I need you to stop creating spaces of trauma where being resilient is all I'm allowed to be. And I never get this name right, but I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep trying. Dr. Omolara Uwamadimo. Got it? Uwamadimo. Yes, it's very important to say those names even when they are challenging, so I'm going to stay at it. But ultimately, we go in, and I can say with my experience, and I think a lot of the work in the world is like intervention, Band-Aids, let's fix things, let's disrupt things. I'm a big prevention person in all facets, harm reduction, prevention, but just think of a world where us as humans can be more than resilient. Yes, resiliency is brilliant, it's a beautiful thing. I'm still trying to understand and how we all get our portion of resiliency, and there's so much more available to us. And so this framework and this lens is actually starting from the beginning and having these spaces where people don't have to bounce back. It's great to be brave and have courage, but I don't think we're supposed to be brave and have courage the ways that we're often called to do so. So these are our objectives for today, because we know that our social work board loves objectives for CEUs. But what we're going to talk about today is we're going to hopefully increase understanding of transformative justice as a framework for practice. I can also email these slides to somebody later. I don't know who I would email them to, but I can make sure you all have access to them afterwards. And you can take pictures because I think they're really pretty, so carry on. But we're going to increase our understanding for this as a framework for practice, and hopefully not just for professional, but for personal life as well. We're going to talk about or explore opportunities to design interventions supportive of sustainable transformation. What does that mean? Transformation is beautiful, and growth is wonderful, but we want sustainability. We want things to stick and to land, and so we're going to talk about some ways to do that. We're also going to discuss ways, or hopefully internally develop some tools to assess systems, organizations, and programs. I am definitely a macro practitioner. I'm very big on macro work. All right, this happens every time, so we'll try to keep it together. And then lastly, we're going to talk about and identify the intersections of transformative justice and the ethics of social work practice. And the impact in the practice environment. And so we're going to look at that. We won't go through scenarios because of time, and I know ethics likes to really do scenarios. There's going to be a lot of invitation inward to think through things and have those conversations. And then this is just our agenda, just so you kind of know where we're going today. We're going to make some connections. I'm going to talk about resistance and discomfort. We're going to do a fun activity around adaptive strategies. So much fun. We'll dive into transformative justice and have those conversations, and then talk about those strategies and some resiliency and healing. And what I like to share with folks is I am not a linear person in general, and so all of this is going to happen today. I promise you, it's here, but there might not be a moment where I'm like, well, now we're going to talk about resiliency and healing. Because the truth is, you're going to tap into your resiliency while you're here this morning. And hopefully, if you're not able to lean into healing in some capacity, you're going to walk out of here and do that as well. And so I like to do the real-time practice of what's happening and having it feed into the bigger picture. So I promise you, though, it is all here. One thing that I did not share about myself is my current role, and I'm going to use examples today about my job. I am the executive director for Kaleidoscope Youth Center. We serve LGBTQI plus youth and young adults ages 12 to 24. I'm finishing up my 5th year there, and it's something. And I love it. I've loved all of the work I've done as a practitioner, but something about this just hits a little differently. And we've expanded our programs. Our budget has quadrupled. We've, I think, tripled our staff over the last 5 years. So there's a lot of things that have happened. And what I love about that experience is I actually am living this stuff. And so it's not a book that I've read, although I've read lots of books and I can recommend them. I'm actually living this stuff in real time with my team and with policies and procedures. So you will hear me share some different examples so you can actually, it just doesn't feel so super abstract. All right, I'm gonna pause there and see if you have any questions for me at this point, if there's anything else you feel like you'd like to know about me or what this day is look like. Yes?
Say the rest of the name of the company or executive director of Kaleidoscope what?
Kaleidoscope Youth Center.
Youth Center?
Youth Center, yep, kycohio.org.
Can you repeat the question?
I can't, when people ask, yes. The question was just what organization I work for, Kaleidoscope Youth Center. Our website is kycohio.org. We just had a fundraiser last night. So I'm like trying to get my head together, but yes.
A few minutes ago, you said something was created for systems
Yes.
and not for people, but I missed that beginning, so I don't know what that something was.
All of this. Systems are not created for people. Systems are created for systems. Systems are created to uphold and sustain systems and frameworks and ultimately, I think money, capital, right? And we move people through them, but if you've had experience moving through them as yourself or a family member or a friend or as a practitioner, it's really hard to move through systems. Any other initial questions or curiosity? Great. I love conversation. You do not have to wait until the end of this to ask any questions. Please, please, please engage with me. Let's have a conversation. I always say, like, yes, I'm up here and I love to share my experiences, but there's collective wisdom in this room. You all have your own experiences, whether personal or by witnessing, and like, let's bring all of that into this and have this conversation. So please feel free to interrupt in that way. And then I would just say for the folks on Zoom, hello, thank you for joining. I kind of move fast and I talk fast, so feel free to pop in there and let them know that you have a question. All right, so when we, don't want to do that yet. I'd like to know who's in the room with me here today. So if we could do just a very brief, because we don't have a ton of time, but if you just want to kind of say your name, you're welcome to share your pronouns if that feels right for you. But tell us like what you do or what brought you here today. Would you like to go first? Okay.
My name's Dave Martin. I'm a social worker. I've been a 1989 grad. I was staff before staff actually in the building and everything. I'm currently working at Centers for Dialysis Care, which is about a mile from here over towards Cleveland Clinic. I've been there for 12 years working with dialysis patients as their social worker.
Wonderful. Thank you. We're just going to snake up and then come back down.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Tracy Collier. I'm a grad from 97. I am actually working for a local school district, trying to transform them to be more whole child focused, integrating trauma-informed practices, restorative practices, all of those things.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Good luck. And thank you for that. Hi, welcome. We're just doing a very brief name and I brought you here.
I graduated in 97, and I am at a Christian social services agency that does some hard work to open and affirming.
Nice.
And losing their funders that they originally had and getting them And I do, I help inform our counseling group about trauma and attachment.
Nice. Thank you. Hi.
Jeff, Jeff Hamilton. I graduated from Mandel in '96. I run a large pastoral counseling practice in Lancaster, Dayton, 23 years ago. I also work a lot with military peace officers.
Nice. Thank you. Over here.
Hi, I'm Elena Nail. I am an Berkeley College graduate. My partner is from this semester, so I've studied gas the last 2 years for this semester. But I'm currently working as a counselor and art therapist at College Plus Youth Center.
Yes.
I want to connect after.
Yes.
Youth Center, and it's mostly the work. Like I love seeing Instagram posts about that stuff.
Nice. Our friends. Thank you.
I'm Elena's partner, Katie. I graduated back in May.
Hi.
I'm a very new social worker, but I'm here in Cleveland at Frontline Services, providing trauma assisting therapy to children and families.
Nice. Thank you. Yes.
Margie Edgeworth, double grad, 85 with my master's and 17 with my PhD.
Nice.
I'm working as a faculty member now, and I teach a course in mindfulness where we do a unit on social justice and how mindfulness is important in social justice, so it's really
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Hi.
I'm Megan Rod. I am a parent of a first-year Case Western undergrad. We study finance and computer science. We are from New York City. I am here this morning. I'm not a social worker. I am actually a lawyer, and for the last 17 years, I've been running a small law firm based in Manhattan, New York. But I have engaged with, interacted with, dialogue with, and come across many, many people you can imagine in New York City who go through, I think that's the word, or who need the system to work
Yeah.
for them. And as a lawyer, just feel so frustrated all the time. So I'm interested in that. I just want to hear what all of you have to say. I'm here to learn.
I'm glad you're here. I'm going to say something that might be offensive. I know you're all like, what is she going to say? My wife is like, what is she going to say? I've always said that Cleveland is like the New York City of Ohio. Does that feel accurate? Or is that a little blasphemous? I don't know.
So, I did have a case here
Uh-huh.
7 weeks back several years ago, but I was in federal court like downtown,
Uh-huh.
near by the water. And back then, I remember thinking that, oh, like, this is an interesting city. Like, it's very laid out.
Uh-huh.
Very concentrated. And then so when my son decided to come here, like I welcomed that idea. So I haven't been here long enough for me to say yes or no to that. But what I could tell you is that it's a very interesting city. I feel like Clevelanders kind of self-discount and they don't realize how interesting the city is.
Yeah.
They kept doubting me when I kept saying, like 2 years ago, when I was talking to the jurors, and I feel like I love being here. They thought I was being sarcastic, but I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Aaron, I'm the wife, they, she, reading pronouns. Other than the Ohio Rest Collective work that we do, I am creative in Columbus, and I also work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, global social responsibility and philanthropy, making community partnerships with a lot of organizations. So I'm here in support, and I'm also here because this applies directly to my work and my framework and how we move. I work for Seminole Hard Rock Cafe International, that kind of thing. So it's applicable everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you for driving today.
Tara Tushke, I'm currently in the master's program, direct practice with adults. I am placed at the LGBT Center in Cleveland.
Nice.
I work with the Rainbow Pioneers, the 50-plus group. And I currently work for a startup, a mental health startup based in Texas that focuses on ketamine treatments and other kind of cutting-edge treatments
Nice.
to help mental health, to improve mental health in folks. So,
Wonderful. Thank you.
My name is Kayla McNeil. I'm in the Master's Social Work program. I am currently placed for my practicum at a private practice. Primarily, I work with children. My specialty is going to be with children, youth, and family, but I do have a few adult clients as well right now.
Great, thank you.
And I'm Kyra Hopper. I'm also in current graduate. We're all in the same cohort, actually.
Nice.
Yeah, so same like Kayla said, I work with children, youth, and families. I currently work at Ohio Guidance as a behavioral health specialist. So.
Great, thank you. Okay. Okay.
I'm Argentina. This is my husband Juan Carlos, my daughter Rafaela. We are from Mexico. Rafaela is a freshman here, studying dance and astronomy. And well, we're here for homecoming, and I asked them to come with me to listen to you because, well, I am a volunteer in several organizations in Mexico, in our hometown. Primarily, I am on the board of a foundation that my mother started 25 years ago, which we work for the empowerment of women in Mexico. I have also worked as a volunteer for almost 40 years in a political party in, I don't know how to say it in English. Well, in the training, it's volunteer work in training of the people who work there. And, well, I'm very interested to hear, like, the insights that you might have in this area.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you all for doing that. I think it's always important to know who's in the room, but this is just the beginning part of transformative justice is we build relationships. We got to slow down sometimes. And when we talk about systems, right, we're always trying to go and do and move and to-do lists. And sometimes it's okay to just, take a moment to pause, to hear each other's voices, to say who we are, the truth about who we are, to see what we're doing out here in the world. There's so much good work happening just in this space here. And to my Zoom friends, if you want to put in the chat who you are and where you are from, that would be wonderful. My wife is going to take my earrings off, but I'm going to try to persevere through this. We'll see. But please put that in the chat so that there can be some connection there as well. But I think it's also just important to listen to people and start those relationships. I talked about this individual nervous system. When we're all together, we create a collective nervous system. So right now, in this room, we are a living system. And we're sharing this space today in our ideas and in our feelings, and we're all listening. And so it's a really, I think, beautiful opportunity. And I'm happy that you all are here. All right, so I'm going to talk about resistance briefly. I teach in the OSU College of Social Work. I do a lot of my courses are community stuff, and they call it cultural competency, DEI, all of those things. And one of our courses around cultural competency and counseling, in our text, it talks about the different types of resistance that we may experience, and we're talking about diversity issues in particular. So there's cognitive, there's emotional, and there's behavioral. Cognitive is the mindset. Basically, your brain cannot believe that things are as bad as they are. The most simple example that I use is if I am sharing my experience of racism, and for somebody to say, oh, it can't, I'm sure that's not that bad. We've come so far. Or I'm sharing, I walk into a store or a restaurant and I don't get spoken to, and then a white woman comes behind me and gets addressed immediately. Typically, I hear, what do you think I hear? They didn't see you. Yes, maybe they were having a bad day. And yes, all of that could be true. And I'm still having an experience where I was not seen as a human being. So that's that cognitive resistance that we experience. Emotional is all the feelings that come up. Guilt, shame, anger, anxiety, sadness, any human emotion. When we start to talk about issues and challenges with systems and transformation and diversity factors, emotions come up. It's beautiful, and it's going to happen. And then we've got the behavioral part, and this is something so dynamic that I discovered just a couple of years ago, 2 ways that it happens. One is it gets us into this space of like, oh, I'm only one person. There's only so many hours in a day. The problem is just too big. What can I do? But then there's this other really slick and seductive way that we experience working with an organization in Philly, and it's creating a distraction. And so we were working with this nonprofit organization in Philly, and we were talking about racial inequity within their organization. And it was an internal conversation, but somehow they started talking about external things. And it was related enough that I couldn't catch it right away. And I was like, wait a minute, this has nothing to do with what's happening in here. So it's like that deflection and that, distraction, but that's actually a behavioral resistance because it was too hard to talk about the things that are happening on the inside. And it's slick, it really is. And I talk about these because I want to name it because it's going to happen with everybody in here if it hasn't already. And this is our brain's really beautiful way of trying to protect us. Because when we get so close to the issues of injustice, oppression, marginalization, it gets intolerable. And it should be intolerable. That's how change happens. Imagine if in our country, even just in Ohio, if everybody had to get close to the seat of poverty, hunger, untreated mental health symptoms, abuse, neglect, all the things that we're all working and the people we're working with, imagine what kind of change there would be. But we're able to distance ourselves from it. We're able to sedate ourselves and not be engaged. And this is one of the ways that our brain does that. It distracts us in a different way. And so what I just think is important, like I said, to name it, but there's also this invitation to step into the and. So like it's fine. Maybe I share something, you're like, it can't be that bad. And why would this woman lie to me about this? Let me listen, let me be curious. When the emotions come up, it's okay. We're humans, we're living people. You have them. You can feel anxious or sad or feel shame, and I'm so glad that I'm alive and I can feel this, like I'm present. And then with the behavioral, yeah, of course it's a big problem, or a hard problem, or a vast problem, and I'm here. And I know there's just one, let me just find one small thing that I can do different. Let me find one different outcome to which I can attach. So getting into that space of and that's really what we're doing when we talk about transformative justice. It's stepping into the and. We can see the things, we can experience them, we can get mad, we can get angry, and there's more options and there's opportunity. And for me, that's where I find hope in that space of and. Hope that something can be different and something can be better. All right, we are going to do an activity. So I am going to ask you to stand if you are able. Folks on Zoom, I hope that you will join in. If you're on camera and you want to come off camera, that's fine. But if you all are able to stand or willing to, that would be great if you're able. If not, this can happen in your seat as well. Maybe a little stretch, move around. I love it when I ask people to do this with no context. They're like, I don't know what to do. We just met. All right, so we are going to talk about our adaptive strategies. And as we said, we have this nervous system. We've got fight, flight, freeze, fawn, all the different ways to respond. And so what I want us to practice first is to get into a shape or a position or stance to fight against something. So you're fighting against, like, what does that look like in your body? So for me, it's doing something like this. And we're just gonna hold it. You're fighting against. And we're just gonna hold it for a moment, really get that into those muscles so you remember it. All right, you can come back to what I like to call neutral. Shake that out a little. The next is compliance or endurance. What does that look like for you? They could be two different things, absolutely. They feel like they're different words, but we're going to talk about how they're friends. So getting your compliance or endurance, yeah. All right, you can come out of that and kind of shake a little. And then flying under the radar. Not being seen, shrinking. What does that look like for you? All right, and come back to that neutral space. And just so you don't get stuck there, let's just kind of bring our shoulders up and roll them back and down. Maybe just sway a little bit. I don't want you to be stuck in fighting against all day, unless you need to be. All right, thank you. You're welcome to return to your seats. What did you notice when doing this exercise? Anything that came up in your body, what you felt or were thinking? What did you notice?
For me, compliance and endurance is relation to shame.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Somehow I'm not good enough to challenge.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What else?
There's a sense of like shrinking yourself, but we started at a very strong,
Uh-huh.
present stance, and then I tended to slowly,
Just-
and I was literally down with my hands open.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Back here?
So with the fight, I felt like I needed to push forward
Mm-hmm.
or push upward, forward or upward. Compliance, endurance is just holding my place. So I felt myself digging into, towards the floor and trying to stay there. And then flying under is really getting myself to go under the ground.
Yeah.
Or as low as possible. But it did occur to me that all three stances or all three positions do take a lot of energy, but it's a different direction that the energy is being, focused on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Mhm.
I've only been really verbal in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
Sorry. I've only become verbal about the last 5 years, and fight against for me was really grounding into ground first. That was like the most important thing. But I still felt like I could say what I needed for compliance, endurance, and flying under the radar for me. I mean, I've done it my whole life, and it's hiding. It's like people have always said, why don't you talk more? Because when I finally talk in groups, they want to hear what I say. But, I mean, it took me 50 years.
Yeah. I'm glad you're doing it now.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you. And then, yes, down here.
I was going to say, fighting against for me seemed kind of unusual because I'm always looking for a way to cooperate instead of fight, and although, I can be very assertive when I need to, that's usually as far as I go. I try not to fight because that never seems to do anything but reduce both sides to something lower. So that's how I felt anyway.
Sure, thank you for that. And do you find, and this could be for everybody, in that space of cooperating and being agreeable, is that a form of enduring and complying sometimes? Could be, maybe not. These are really just questions. Did any of you have an experience in either one of these shapes that felt the most familiar? Like I know you talked about being under the radar. What else felt familiar?
Fighting against was the most comfortable for me.
Yeah, I know you were like, I got this.
Fighting against was the most comfortable for me. Flying under the radar to me is for me at least the way I see the words, is a quieter version of that. So I didn't see flying under the radar as shrinking and hiding. For me it was, I'm still fighting against, but I'm secretly planting seeds everywhere. Whereas compliance felt like giving up. And I'm struggling with the endurance piece currently, so I'm not, because I tend to fight against, I struggle to keep fighting or keep planting secret seeds of change while maintaining endurance in a very broken system.
Absolutely, and I love that you asked about those, and this is making me think too, because endurance can be looked at a lot of ways. It could be enduring something and suffering and self-sacrificing, but it also can be looked at as having the stamina to keep going. And so I appreciate you asking that, and I'm probably going to change that slide, because it can be very different. So for the sake of this, thinking about endurance or enduring as like, I'm just going to it's going to be okay soon, it'll be fine, it's not that bad, I'll be all right, no big deal, it's good, I got it. people have it worse than me. It's fine. It's fine. That's the endurance and compliance up here. Anybody have one that was particularly difficult to get into? Yeah.
I guess it was challenging for me to put the endurance and compliance together because I felt like those were two different things. So I just chose endurance because I felt like that one was still kind of strong to me. But another thing that I noticed was just how everyone. Sorry, the chat just came back. It was just interesting how everyone interpreted those things differently, and it just made me think about like the clients that we serve, and just we put things in front of them, and then we interpret it one way when they're seeing it as totally different. So I just thought that was interesting, just observing, because Kyra, like when it said fight, I was like, what? Like put your fist up. Like, what are you doing? But even with endurance, like I stood up strong because for you're enduring, that you're presenting a certain level of strength. And then when it came to hiding, I was thinking the same way. Like, yeah, it looks like I'm like hiding, but really, I'm still being strong. I'm just sneaking to do it. So
Yeah. Thank you for that. Sure.
I was going to say that endurance feels different to us, I think, because maybe we're baby social workers, as I call us. We're still in training. We haven't been out in the field as long, so endurance, I'm sure, feels very different. We're just starting to learn like those tools. So endurance to me kind of speaks to, here we go, and like, gotta be in it for the long haul, and this is gonna be tough, and we talk about tough stuff all the time. Obviously, we tackle the big stuff. So endurance has that like positive connotation, like get ready to get in there and do the thing, but we're still so fresh and baby-faced that
so beautiful. You're
we
like
haven't
happy.
experienced maybe some of those struggles that some of y'all have experienced. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate this conversation about endurance too, because it is a long game. This work is a long game. And you have to pace yourself, whatever type of work it is, however you're choosing to change your part of the world, it is a long game. And so there is a level of endurance that is necessary, and there's a level of strategy. And I love to be subversive, Tracy. You're like my friend here, planting those seeds. And whenever I have interns, I'm like, here's 2 things about being a social worker that I need you to learn: to be strategic and to be subversive. I never breach ethics. I'm very ethical. I take this very seriously. And doing no harm and all the other things we have to do to keep my license. But I'm going to find a way to make something happen. And so that is an example of endurance, and that is an example of trying to get through the system. We do this here to start off with because we all have adaptive strategies. We have them. Every single person does. And then again, looking at the community and the systemic level. You can get individual community systems. That's how we're kind of looking at things. And they do emerge in this response to a threat of our safety, connection, belonging, or dignity at the core. And the thing is, they never go away. The goal is never to get rid of your adaptive strategies. That would be silly. That's like not wearing a life jacket, right? But the goal is to not be absorbed by them. And going back to that place of making decisions and living from a place of thriving and not surviving. But we also do it to remember that other people are also having human experiences. So like you were saying, like you can see something, somebody might have a certain stance and you don't even know what's showing up. We did this a few years ago with some Black women doctoral students at OSU, and they were doing the fight against, and then one of them was standing like this. She looked super chill, just kind of standing there. And I was like, I'm very curious about your fight against looking so chill. And she's like, oh, my fists are balled up. You can't see them. I'm ready all the time. And think about how many of us go throughout the day based on our experiences, how we woke up that day, precipitating factors, our diversity factors. We're ready. You're on guard. You're braced. There's so many different ways we can talk about these things and how they show up in the work that we're doing. And when you begin to engage in the work of transformative justice, you're going to experience a threat to your connection and belonging easily. Possibly safety, depending on what safety means for you, and possibly your dignity and how people see you, relate to you, honor you, notice you. And so when those things happen, you have to figure out a way to be able to not be absorbed by those strategies and find a place of rest and neutrality. The other strength to this is if that's our baseline, we have nowhere else to recover, right? So if I wake up every morning and I'm here, and then something happens and I'm here and it's only 9 o'clock, my recovery is just coming right back here. So I'm going to be activated in some way all day long. The awareness allows us to be in choice. Any questions or reflections at this point before we move into get a little deeper? Mm-hmm.
Can you just give us an example of what you said, the baseline and that thing you just talked about?
Yes. So when I talk about baseline, it's like our starting point. I should think of a good analogy or metaphor, and I can't right now. So it's our starting point. And so it's, when you, like I said, when you wake up in the morning, and those days you wake up late, and you have an important meeting to get to, and you forgot to put the clothes in the dryer from the night before, and oh no, I have to pick up something for the meeting, and oh my God, I had to send that email. You know that frenzy, right? Am I the only one that lives like this sometimes? Okay. I try really hard not to. So that's how your day starts. Then you're getting into the car and you're driving and there's traffic. I'm not saying anybody in here experiences road rage, but some people do. So then you're driving like this and you're probably cussing and your shoulders are up. Then you get to the meeting and you're a few minutes late and the big boss is there. So you're trying to get in and you get settled and all these things, and you forgot your coffee, you're still tired, your pants are a little wrinkly because you forgot to put them in the dryer. All these things are happening, and that's how you are. So think about how you're just going to be sitting in this meeting. Your shoulders are probably still up here, your muscles are probably tight, you might be breathing heavier than usual, your brain is probably racing. That's your baseline for the day. That means everybody who encounters you throughout the day, that's who they're going to encounter. And every situation that you're dealing with or anything that you're responding to is going to come from that place. That's your resource for the day. When you can get to a place of neutrality, or you're not absorbed by your strategies, when you're not absorbed by this compliance, or an example of a compliance is taking on everybody's work all the time. I'm just going to do it. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Yeah, I'm a social worker. That's what we're here for. Oh, I know I don't get paid well, but it's fine. Like, you get compliant, you're also going to be really stressed and tight too. And so when we talk about the baseline is you want to give yourself a chance, basically. So if you had a baseline where maybe you could have just paused before that day unfolded the way that it did, maybe you could have started somewhere else. Maybe you could have, and it's not this spiritual bypass, you just put on a smile and take a few breaths. No, that does not always work. Sometimes it does, but sometimes if you can just pause and at least be in choice to say, this is gonna be a rough day, let me make sure I schedule something in for myself for 3 minutes, or whatever it is that helps you just kind of bring things down. You wanna deactivate your nervous system at the end of the day. Was that helpful? Okay. I could talk about this nervous system stuff for hours. I'm trying to stay focused, but I'm so fascinated by her it's so fascinating. All right, so transformative justice. This is what I want to share, is that I first stumbled across this probably like 5 years ago. And so this work has been adapted from the work of Generation 5. And their work was really centered on survivors of sexual assault and abuse. And so a lot of these principles have been taken and adapted for organizations and communities. Transformative justice is a set of practices that focuses on creating change in social systems. Sounds so simple, right? It's doing the hard work of digging up the things and the situations that allowed harm to occur. It seeks to transform those conditions, as I said, by disrupting harm, engaging in repair, and ultimately working to reduce the impact and damage done by the systems which are embedded in dominant culture. Very lot of words to say, how can we fix this? What can we do different? Harm reduction for me is reducing my participation in systems or cycles of oppression or harm. An example of that, I think, for my own life is probably about 12 Years ago, I sat on a statewide board. It was Trans Ohio, statewide working with trans and non-binary folks in the state of Ohio. And my way of engaging in harm reduction was to learn as much as I could so that I could be present and build relationships and be a good support system and accomplice or ally, so I don't participate in the harm that my friends are already experiencing in the world. And so harm reduction can be very individual, it can be collective, it can be systemic. This approach essentially seeks to provide folks who are marginalized safer spaces and opportunities for healing. And so it's acknowledging that something isn't okay or not right, and like it's giving that invitation, that opportunity for that. You may have also heard of restorative justice, which is an approach that's response to harm, and typically it's a conversation by the person who has done the harm and the person or people who were harmed, and it allows the impacted person to talk about what happened, how they were impacted, and maybe make a request for repair. And then allows the person who engaged in the harm to hear that, so there's some conversation, and then basically agree to engage in that repair or not. This is an oversimplification. It's typically done in circles, community circles, where elders or other folks are there. It has a long history in indigenous communities because it's about bringing community together. So I also like to think about this from like non-police response, crisis response systems. Like this is another place where this is happening in the world. And then community accountability, these are all interwoven together, but it's this person-centered process to cultivate community, collective power, wellness, wholeness. Like that's what we want to see in our communities. And so all of this comes together in this nice little funnel, and they don't exist separate from each other. What I think is so interesting too is that restorative justice it's inherently embedded. If you're engaging in transformational or transformative work, there's going to be restoration. It's like can be an outcome. And the accountability is going to happen too as you're following these principles. What I love about transformative justice is although it's a framework, it's also a method and an approach in terms of engaging in harm reduction and repair. These are the principles of transformative justice. Liberation I think can be such a sticky word because I think we all want to be liberated, we all want to be free. Here's the differences for me. We have this really beautiful, fluffy cat at home. I think I have decided she's a Siberian forest cat. I have no proof of that, but she looks like all the ones that are there. Her name is Temple. And she's like 15 pounds, 13-year-old. She's just so sweet. Okay. I usually have a picture. I didn't bring a picture today. But I think about Temple being in her cat carrier coming back from the vet. And I sit the carrier down and I unzip the little door. I'm like, you're free to go. And she doesn't. Because I haven't addressed the conditions around her carrier. So there could be danger, there could be water, there could be another animal, there could be things that she doesn't feel safe. So she's free, but she is not liberated. So we get back to this idea of transforming conditions, right? So that people can actually experience liberation. Shifting power, that's a lot of fun. Safety, I don't believe that we can ever guarantee anybody's safety, including our own, but we can do things and put things in place to have safer experiences, safer environments. At KYC, we talk about a safer place. We can't guarantee harm won't occur, but we're there for the repair, and we're going to do our best to reduce the potential for harm to occur. Of course, there's accountability, collective action. Respecting cultural differences and that cultural relativism, I think, is important. It very simply means like using your own culture as the center and how we evaluate other cultures. Think about like ethnocentrism, or how we might look at. Here's a good example. When I was a clinical director, I was working with a group of managers. We were doing end-of-year evaluations, which we're getting close to that at everybody's job. It's that time of year. And we were going through the evaluations, and I would say probably half of the group of managers had marked a really specific group of employees as needing improvement and accepting feedback without defensiveness. What do you think those employees who had that needs improvement, what do you think they looked like? No, the ones who needed improvement. They were Black women.
She said they look like
Exactly. And here's the thing, it was across the board. all the black women, they were rated as needs improvement for accepting feedback without defensiveness. And we had to name that and say, well, what's going on there? Well, so-and-so, like when I tried to tell her she did something wrong, she just said okay and walked away. We also live in the Midwest, and we've got this Midwest polite thing going on, like, okay, thank you for your feedback. Okay, sure, thank you know, or whatever it is that we're gonna do, or sometimes people cry, but cultural relativism is when we expect people to respond and deal with things the same way that we've been trained to do, we've been socialized to do. So we think about all the different diversity factors, gender, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, class, ability, disability, all the different ways we just try to function, we're not all gonna do something the same. And then of course, sustainability, we don't wanna do the Band-Aid thing. Band-Aids fall off. The three core beliefs of transformative justice are individual and collective liberation are equally important, mutually supportive, and fundamentally intertwined. I am not free until you are free. The conditions that allowed oppression and exclusion to occur must be transformed to achieve justice in individual and collective experiences of oppressions. The systems don't work. And then systemic responses to oppression not only fail to advance individual and collective justice, but also condone and perpetuate cycles of oppression, discrimination, and marginalization. We cannot do what we've always done. And it's so easy to get stuck in that, well, this is how it's been done before, this is the easiest way to do it, it works. In Columbus, a couple of years ago, a large foundation or board got about $6 million for housing, for youth housing. And so there's this big collective talking about our youth housing system. It sucks, by the way. Our housing system sucks, by the way. In general, I'm sure it's similar here. Really well-meaning people, right? So if we get to number 2, the conditions, like these conditions are here. Our housing, affordable housing, homelessness, houselessness, I don't think we deal with it. I don't understand anybody's homeless. That's a whole different training. But at Kaleidoscope Youth Center, we started a housing program, and it was the first, and it's currently the only one that centers the needs and experiences of queer and trans youth. And so I'm sitting here, and we're talking about housing, and when I mentioned our program, I was told, you can't just have housing for gay kids. And I said, well, why not? Well, that's discrimination. And I said, against whom? Well, I mean, you can't do that. It's never been done before. Columbus is a very political city. I love it so much. And it's very political. To the extent that you heard me say we center the needs and experiences. I didn't say it's only for. We center the needs and experiences, and that works, that resonates, that gets our message across. So it's making those decisions, even in real time, and how you're going to talk about something. Not everything has to be a big fight. I got to be subversive about it. I could have stood really strong, like this is only for queer and trans youth. That's not going to get us the resources that we need to serve those queer and trans youth. So like it's making those decisions in real time to be strategic. The work isn't changing. Our staff is, they're experts in the work that they're doing. But we're doing something different for these young folks to be able to have a housing experience that is different than what already exists out there. We've got emergency housing where they're not having to go to shelters. We're very, very low barrier. We don't take any HUD funding because the definitions of homelessness are very narrow. And LGBTQ youth typically don't meet the very basic criteria for homelessness. They're not literally homeless because they're couch surfing, they're staying at different places. And there's not a lot of mechanisms to get that demographic information to even know how folks identify. So the only way that that system can ever start to begin to be changed is to do something different. And now the Ohio Department of Health has data. It's not a ton of, our housing program's not huge, but they're starting to get more data about the young people that we serve to know what those needs are. Also, housing is God's work. So if anybody ever wants to do it, bless you, it is really hard. I talked about transformative justice as a model. So this is a bigger picture framework. The model is to engage in accountability. This looks like disrupting harm. I used to say ending harm. Ending harm is really hard, especially when you're not the one that's engaging in harm. So disrupting it, and that's what I talked about. When we can't guarantee safety, but a safer place, it also means being committed to disrupting what's happening. An example is I was teaching a course, it was during COVID, And we were talking about, we were on the section around LGBTQ folks, and we were talking about gender identity. And there was really generative conversation around just, you know, being trans and I'm binary and what that meant. It was generative for a bit. And then some folks started saying some things that I found to be very harmful, and I was listening, because I like to have that dynamic tension, right? Generative conflict. My wife tells me that I'm the opposite of conflict averse. She thinks I just dive right in, and I do, because I think it can be generative. And so I'm holding this space, I'm letting this happen, and all of a sudden it just got really dehumanizing. And I said, all right, we're gonna pause here. And the reason is, the way this conversation is going is it feels harmful, and you don't know who else is on this call, who else is in this class. You don't know. You don't have to know. You still shouldn't be dehumanizing in your conversation. And so my role as the professor was to disrupt that in that moment. And it was really uncomfortable, and some people went off screen because we were still quarantined and COVID. And I got a couple complaints, actually, to the program director. But that's an example of being there. So I had to be present enough to hear that and hold the space, but also be present enough to say, let's stop this here. And then I explained why, and then how we could do something different. The next piece, in this model, is a commitment not to engage in harm or reduce that contribution. Excuse me, and then provide an offering as representation of your accountability and commitment to healing. Real life example, if you are familiar with Pride in Columbus, Ohio, it is very large. In 2017, again, this is oversimplification, but the Black Pride 4 were arrested and experienced police brutality. They were jailed in, what's the word I'm looking for? In places that did not align with their gender identity. It was bad. And it stayed bad for about 18 months in the community. And so myself and some others pulled the community leaders and organizations together to engage in this process through this transformative justice model. So in disrupting harm, they needed to name the harm. And so then engaging in that centered accountability around what that looks like. We named it all. It was a very long list. And then they had to demonstrate their commitment to transformation to the community, especially queer and trans folks, people of color. And that was what kind of trainings are going to be done, education, dialogue, and that offering, that visual offering. Some folks might call it reparations, but it's how do people know that you're doing what you say you do? For some of them, I'm trying to think, some of the organizations, they made sure that they put a DEI person in their organization, so that way they could have a better eye on how inclusive they were being. One thing we've also seen in our community in Columbus is that I think for the first time, all the organizations have black or brown leadership. I think the majority of like the bigger the organizations, which was a big thing around like kind of stepping back and letting other people lead, and not just lead in a way like, okay, you have the title, but like actually have that diversity that makes a difference, that actually shifts things. Other things, we're giving free or low-cost space to communities of color, organizations or groups of color. So how do people know that you're doing what you say you're going to do? We also do this work with organizations on a more that system level and doing transformative justice roadmaps. So we get in there, we talk to the staff and employees, the team, and we identify the harm. How can it be disrupted? What do they want to see different? And we list them out in these 3 different ways. And then centered accountability is really just engaging in ownership without the expectation of the person who was harmed to make you feel better. So one of the big things in 2017 was having an apology. And that apology did not happen for over 18 months because they didn't think it would be well received. That can't be a reason why you want to engage in repair. You don't know how that person's gonna feel, but you still have to center that. I love the example of if I were to step on my wife Karen's foot as I'm walking by, and I'm just like, I step on it, she says, that's okay, no big deal. And somehow I do it again, and she's like, it's fine, I'm fine. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I stepped on your foot. I do this all the time. Are you okay? Let me see your foot. What can I do to help you? I'm so sorry, I feel horrible. I feel so bad about this. Eventually she's just gonna say, what? She's going to be like, it's okay. How many of you told somebody it's okay when they do something that hurts or harms or disrupts you? I remember years ago, I was watching Ellen on stand. I used to sneak and watch Ellen on stand-up when I was in high school. My mom would probably be like, oh, that's what's going on. And she was doing this bit around like in the bathroom, public bathrooms, and somebody walks in on you when you're at a stall, and they'll be like, oh, sorry. We'll be like, oh, that's okay. It's not okay. But she's like, what if they just came in and brought their friends? Like, hey, y'all, she said, it's okay. Everybody come on in. Right? And so when we don't engage in centered accountability, we are wanting people to make us feel better. The goal of this is to just say you're sorry, apologize, take ownership, see what else is needed, and then move on. Or if like maybe you misgender someone and they correct you, or somebody else corrects you, you can say thank you, and you keep it moving. So the centered accountability piece is being more neutral around it and not expecting for people to make you feel better when you mess up, because you are going to mess up. We all are. And I just say to you, if we had longer time, I would have us all take a break, but we don't have that time. But I'm going to ask you to stand up. You can move up. I know my voice can draw you in. And let's just take a moment and stay with your feet, just kind of hips width apart. Zoom folks, you're welcome to do this too. I'm trying to think I want to have you do some breathing, some funny breathing, but some ha breaths. Yeah? All right, we're going to do some ha breaths, and this is fun. Make sure there's a little room between you and your other person. You also can do this sitting if standing doesn't feel good to you. But we're going to kind of get down like this, like a little mini squat as you're able. And then take your hands, put them on the inside, like right by your knees. And we're going to do ha breaths. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. Take care. And this is what they are. When I tell you, we're going to go ha, ha, ha. All right? Look at you already in it. I love it. This is so beautiful. Okay, pause, take a break. A breath, how does that feel? All right, we're going to do it again together. We're going to do 10 of those, all right? I'll count them down. Are you ready? So let's get down, get in our squat. Ready? Let's go. Ha, 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 ha. One more. Ha. All right, what do you feel? What do you notice? Yeah. All right. Do you want to do it again? Are you good? Is that enough? Good? All right. You can sit back down if you like, or if you want to stay standing, that's fine. Just want to get us moving, get the blood flowing. That practice is really good if you are angry, frustrated, tired. But also, I use them if I have to do something big. If I have to give a big speech or talk in front of people who might be scary, I will go and stick with myself and do those, because it activates that fire in you. Like I'm also kind of like sweating a little bit because it's heat. It moves heat. Heat is good. We need that to take action so we don't get stuck. So definitely use those. I'd love to know if any of our friends on Zoom engaged in that and what that was like for them. Absolutely.
I do consulting with a Fortune 5 company.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a union manager. I'm amazed at how the same process you're going through isn't working.
Really?
The cultural differences between white shirts and blue shirts.
Oh, yeah.
And he's aware of, I'm knowing of how the same issues with their cultures, when they'll talk about them versus us.
Mm-hmm.
Those employees, or your employees, are really aware of how this whole process works on real, kind of a micro, macro level
Yes.
in the businesses.
Oh, yes.
I've been saying for years that it's cultural. No, this is a business issue. No, this is a cultural
Culture.
issue.
Yes.
It's really interesting to listen to the white shirt, blue shirt mentality. Those in the first floor, those in the second floor. And how we've done that. And when we've done work to bring someone who's a blue shirt and have them do temporary white shirt work, it's like, wow, they know this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This program is interesting how it goes across cultural lines and cultures.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And that's why the very first principle is my liberation is tied up in your liberation. I'm not free unless you're free. Our society, we're going to dig into this, like we are meant to be in caste systems or different class systems and separated. And I mean, just think about it. You get your master's degree. You can get an LISWS if you do all the right things. And if you do that, you get paid more and just a little bit, but it's fine. It's fine, right? Yeah. But I also I have more freedom because I am an LISWS. I can do all these things that an LSW can't do. So even in our licensure and in our professional systems, there are different things set up that impact how we're able to function and do the work. And this is not a commentary if that's right or wrong, it's just the facts. So we look at ethical considerations. This is this invitation into there, even looking at how our licensure system works. And I know ASWB had some issues around the testing to be able to pass, and like seeing how black and brown folks had much higher fail rates than white folks did, and what's that about, and SATs and ACTs, like there's all these different things that we can look at as examples. But when we look at transformative justice, it really promotes the idea and the framework that the interpersonal harm reflects systemic and institutional dimensions of oppression. It's all tied in together. Like we cannot separate this stuff. The shorter way, the personal is political. If you're engaged in that way, it's all there. And so when we can begin to integrate our experiences in that way and not separate, then we can also begin to integrate our interventions and systems for change. And so this is where we have this ethical responsibility to actually challenge systems that create and sustain harm. That's in the NASW Code of Ethics. Now we know that defining harm can be very different depending on your political and faith beliefs and a lot of other experiences, but we do have that responsibility. But remember at the beginning I said our systems aren't set up for people. We have so much work that we get stuck in doing, high caseloads, all the things, it's really hard to fight against the system. So then you begin to find ways where I love being subversive. I was sharing on the way up here, I'm a decidedly the system person. I thrive there. I'm really big on building relationships because it's all about relationships. I love to be strategic and creative. And I'm an old cranky social worker. When you were saying that you all were new babies and happy, I was like, oh, I want to see you in 20 years. I hope you're still happy. I love what I do, and I'm cranky. And my team, sometimes I say things, I'm like, I know it sounds cold when I'm like, they'll make a different decision next time, but like, they'll make a different decision next time. I'm not gonna spend all my energy on that because it starts to go away at some point. But when you get so deep in the work right here, you miss the work out here. And even if you look at systems, you think about people who filed like civil rights complaints or grievances or whatever, how many steps they have to go through just to get that addressed. That's another kind of example of how those systems get set up to almost drain people if you don't have the endurance to get through. And so this approach of transformative justice helps support that type of engagement. And so I love us to look at the practice environment as the place focus for change. So we talked about the individual, we talked about community, we've got systemic or systems. Kaleidoscope Youth Center is very much a meso practice. So it's got the direct, the micro, the bigger picture, policy, advocacy, organizational development for the macro, but then the meso is that sweet spot in the middle. And I feel very proud about this, but whenever we have interns, I would say 90% come in like, I want to be a therapist when I graduate. And then they're like, I really love back row meso social work. I feel good about that change because I think we need more of us to have that lens. And it's all connected, it's all the same skill set. Spoiler alert, it is the same skill set. So whatever you're doing for your direct practice people, you can do in neighborhoods and communities. And whatever I do in neighborhoods and communities, I can do with my team in an all-staff meeting. I try to use it at home. Sometimes it doesn't always go over well, but the tools still work. So here's examples of looking at this intersection, like assessing critical organizational areas, individual leadership roles, power structures, and designing interventions that support that sustainable transformation. So you mentioned culture, and when we look at culture, we talk about customs, rituals, language, and traditions. This has been adapted from my friend Javier Sanchez of Reach Communications. He does a lot of work in the community, well, actually across the country, with young people and organizations. But when you think about, just in your mind, again, if we were here for a whole or half day, I would have you get in small groups. But think about your culture at work, a culture in which you are in frequently, if it's your placement, internship, and just think about ways you would describe what that's like coming in. Can I play a video on here? I didn't think to ask beforehand. Okay. Well, then we want the Zoom folks to be included, so look up the unequal opportunity race. It's not that long, but it really is a visual, small video visual representation of our systems. And it looks at from, I think it starts like 1400s up until close to present day. But we know that our country and the systems and institutions were built upon racial hierarchy and dominance. That's a fact. We're not here to debate that. The only way that folks who were enslaved could be treated the way they were is if they were dehumanized. Dehumanization is still the practice of dominant groups. So right now in the Ohio State House, there's multiple bills that are attempting to take away gender-affirming care and have queer and trans youth play sports and all these different things to basically just block their quality of life. The only way you can do that and say someone doesn't deserve to go to the doctor that affirms them is to dehumanize them. That's how our systems were built. And although we know that white, cisgender, heterosexual folks are not targeted necessarily, everybody experiences harm. White supremacy harms us all. Oppression actually harms us all because my liberation is tied up in your liberation. The reason we don't always experience it is back to that being sedate, being able to check out, being able to be distracted to do something different. So when we look at ways of critical areas and organizations, we have to bring in the characteristics of white supremacy culture. So when you think about how you would describe the culture of your organization or placement or wherever you are every day, look at some of these examples and how do they show up? I'm just gonna take a sip while you all sit with that. Anything stand out in particular? Sense of urgency? Defensiveness? Fear of open conflict. Yes. Do y'all ever have like meetings with your teams or staff and somebody, the boss or whomever, maybe you're the boss, say something and then it's just quiet? But then there's a meeting after the meeting because people are afraid of that open conflict. So things never actually get back to the person who maybe who has the power to make a change because it's in all the other meetings they weren't a part of. Or you just say okay to things. And that's also a tactic for leadership to use because they know no one's gonna say anything back. Now don't go to work on Monday making a bunch of trouble because you're like, I know what you're doing here. Yes.
So around this, a lot of the conversations that I have with my team or folks is that individually, standing alone, these aren't necessarily bad things, right? Like we have some practices, we're in DEI, so we talked about this yesterday. We have people on camera. We ask our team to be on camera. We're national, we're global. So like we have people on camera. We ask our team to be on camera so we can create, the place we want. Now, from an ableist standpoint or ableism, like that may be asking a lot of people for those things, but we also have the right to not come if we don't have capacity to be present and be on camera, right? So around that could be seen as, perfectionism or right, so emotional comfort or not being there. And one of them on its own is not necessarily bad, but just
Absolutely, thank you for that. Yeah, it's the collective and sense of urgency. Sometimes you need to move a little quicker. You just need to, right? I worked in community mental health. It was a crisis facility. Like, we got to get this done. But there's a way to have a sense of urgency, but also to be effective and have efficiency. So, correct, they're not bad in and of themselves, but it's when it comes together, or is just like our adaptive strategies, your organization gets absorbed by it. Perfectionism is a really big thing. A lot of my younger social workers are really kind of trying to break out of that too. One of the things we do at KYC when people first start is the first 2 weeks, they don't really do anything. Well, they don't think they're doing anything. I have them observe our drop-in center for 2 weeks. That's it. And they're like, well, I could help. Nope, just have a seat. I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I want to let their nervous system settle and join that of the organization. My director of finance, she's been there for a little over a year now, and it took her probably a good 6 months minimum to even not be on alert all the time. She's like, I'm just waiting for fires to put out. I was like, oh no, we don't do that here. We try really hard not to have fires. And if so, it's gonna be really small, we're gonna take care of it. But is that bracing, those adaptive strategies? She was always ready to fight against something. Always on guard, always on alert. Always looking for something wrong. And so it took her about 6 months to just put her shoulders down and kind of breathe. And she still is the one that worries and thinks of all the worst case scenarios, but we can laugh about it now, right? And so when we come from a culture, you just got out of grad school or whatever it is, of like that sense of urgency and getting everything right, how many people hate to not know what they don't know? Right? They're like, I feel like I don't know everything. Well, you don't. Of course you don't. You'll figure it out. It's going to be fine. Trust me. Quantity over quality. Sure, I want high numbers of things. I want to get that data in there. We've got grantors, funders to report to, the community. I want people to see what we're doing. So I do want quantity, but I also want quality. And so it's finding the balance of those. How this typically shows up in organizations these are typically the core areas. So pay equity, advancement opportunities, that culture of accountability, so discipline, grievance issues, what are those procedures. I remember we saw this when I worked in community mental health. The lowest paying staff also had the highest rate of write-ups for being late or tardy or missing work. What do you think those people looked like collectively? Just throw it out there. They were black. They were. A lot of black men. A lot of black men who had a GED, who did not have their own transportation and rode the bus to work. And then the black women were typically single moms and had multiple children and rode the bus to work. And so when we look at that, these procedures and the discipline, like, okay, yeah, they're clocking in late or they're calling off a lot, but there's a collective situation here that we're not seeing amongst other people who work here. And so we're able to kind of look at that and give a little more wiggle room and have those individual conversations versus just firing people. Resource allocation, which departments, which programs get resources to do certain things. There's this really big organization here in Ohio, and it actually happens everywhere, and they have a program that serves black and brown trans folks, and they have the least amount of resources in this multi-million-dollar organization. So that's a very big macro example of that. And then of course the time off and benefits. We started doing unlimited PTO in 2019, I believe, and it was rough. I've got folks who've been with me since I started who just started actually utilizing that benefit in the right way. The right way means like take time off, please. So we have unlimited and flexible time off. We have a summer recess, a fall recess, which is just like 3 days. Then we've got our holiday break. We're closed the last 2 weeks of the year. And then whatever else comes up throughout the year for people. And I also encourage people to take at least a week just away from the office. I know you're probably like, how are y'all getting work done? But believe it or not, it makes a big difference once people started utilizing it. But before they did, they were so stuck in that, that performance, not perfections, and they were afraid that people would make fun of them or be mad at them or whatever it is for taking time off. So it's a mindset and a shift But wellness is really important for this work. And I'd much rather have rested folks who aren't feeling resentful and angry at our young people than people who are just being at work every single day of the year. There's a balance there. But it's also for everybody, regardless if they're part-time or full-time. And that's where that inequity can be dissolved, because it's not just if you work 40 hours a week. Everybody gets to be well. Everybody gets to take a break. Any questions around the organizational piece? Or reflections, excuse me.
I think it's probably more of I guess it's a question and a reflection. Because I was thinking a lot about the previous slide. So working in education, I feel like the nervous system of education always is well. I feel like working in education, the nervous system of education is always 5 foot freeze.
Yes.
Especially for the pandemic.
Yes.
The sense of urgency is great because of the quote-unquote loss of and I feel like to have an awareness that you're even doing this
Yes.
requires rest, right? So you just described all these great opportunities for rest, which don't exist in public education. And so I just want, my wondering is, like, when I think about the fear of open conflict in the meeting after the meeting, 100% that happens.
Yeah.
I don't think it's happening because the person in leadership is trying to create it. I think they don't have the awareness that it's occurring because it's constantly one thing after another.
Yeah.
And so while it is 100% a thing, I don't know how you get there. Because what I want to say is if we just stop and we just slow down and we just pull back instead of doing a fact-finding around why the staff member isn't showing up, we can have a restorative conversation and get to the root of what the problem is and what's the barrier. But it requires that awareness. That Viktor Frankl quote is what I kept thinking of when you said that, right? Between stimulus and response, there is a space. How do you create the space in a larger system that is always in fight, flight, freeze and doesn't have the ability to create all these big breaks? Because even in education where you might think, oh, we get the summer break, teaching staff get
summer break, paraprofessional, our direct service staff get it, but leadership is still fully on.
Yeah.
In the summer. So I don't know. It's just more of a wondering and a how do you get there in larger systems. And
I love that question. I forgot to say at the beginning, I invite dialogue, but also if you're like, this is BS, what are you talking about? Like, you're not saying that, I don't think. You are. It's okay if you do, but like, that's fine. But I love this question because that's the point. How do you make this happen? And hopefully at the end of this, you'll have some ideas, but the short answer is you just do it. Do it. It's hard. It sucks. It slows everything down. I really try to uphold a model of collaborative leadership. You know what that means? I have to hear people's opinions about things when I've already made up my mind of what I want to do. And I am a high driver in my work mode. I am a Leo. I have a very bossy Virgo moon. And I just want to get it done. But I want to model collaborative leadership. I want my workforce, I want them to not just come and produce, but also to grow. I want us to invest. I want to build this collaborative community because I don't believe that if my team doesn't have this, we can't offer it to our young people. You can't give what you don't have. And so because those are my values, I have to live that out. And so that means sometimes we sit in meetings and we talk about what everybody's thoughts are. How would you like to see this go? What's the risk? What's the benefit? That happens. The pseudo-corporate part of my brain's like, this is a waste of time. And it might be, because time is our greatest resource. But it's what am I valuing? Am I valuing time or people? Am I valuing time or the young people that we're serving? Am I valuing time or what's possible in the world? And ultimately, I'm valuing this vision that something else is possible. And so that's a short answer, is you just do it. And that's where people get hooked on. When I tell people about unlimited PTO a couple of years ago, they're like, what? That's not good for the organization. It actually benefits the organization from a financial perspective, if you really want to dig into that. And yeah, it sucks. And sometimes I roll my eyes when people request time off because I'm like, okay. you just were off 2 weeks ago, or something. And I can be annoyed and we can change it, or I can say, great, do you have this covered, and help walk them through the process of radical accountability, which is one of our values and principles at KYC. And so it's the teaching, it's the coaching, and it's the modeling. And it takes time and it's frustrating, and I don't always feel like doing it. And I think when we talk about doing something different, often we don't talk about the dark side of it and the inconvenient. It's inconvenient. Change is inconvenient. I know with my children, even as they were growing up, I used to get so frustrated when I had to parent in a way I didn't want to. And that meant I had to set really strict boundaries around something because I wanted them to, make decisions for themselves so I could be a soft landing for them. Sometimes I had to say no. And I still struggle with that even as a young adult, because I want them to be in the world and kind of figure it out and think for themselves. And sometimes the answer is no. And it doesn't feel good. Or think about time you've had to set a boundary somewhere. Does anybody get mad when you have to enact a boundary? Your hand went up really fast, Karen. Like, man, now I have to, One of my raw edges is when somebody at work makes my job harder because they didn't do their thing. Does anybody else ever deal with that? So it's a rub for me, and I'm like, benefit of the doubt, dignity, yes.
One of the opposite personality reactions is, I have to get mad in order to tell anybody what to think.
Oh, yes, I have to get mad. So then it's like, how do I get to that space? That was something for my own growth I've had to work on over the years because I just want to be cool. Like, I'm adaptable, I'm flexible. And that is a form of being over-boundaried, right? And so you can be under-boundaried, where people just walk all over you, fly under the radar. You comply, you endure, not in the generative way. Or you're over-boundaried and everything is a hard no. No, I'm fighting against. It's my way. That's an over-boundary, because you have to build yourself up to set that boundary. The best case scenario in the most generative space is to just get to your yes and your no. My knees are bent. I'm not locking my knees. My shoulders are down. I'm breathing. I can say no. I can say, please stop. I'm not okay with that. I need a little more time. In fact, I had to send an email yesterday morning to my team, which was very strongly worded. And I sat on it for 24 hours because my initial response was not very generative, not very social worky, and it was righteous. It was okay that I felt the way I felt, but I didn't need to talk to them the way I was feeling in that moment. And so it's also acknowledging our own humanity, and that's going back to those adaptive strategies. We have to name them and know that they're there because they're going to be there. So we can ignore it and let it take over, or we can be like, all right, I'm in fight against right now. I'm gonna work through that before I begin to engage. But it's work. That's what's hard, is you just have to do it. And so then we can look at leadership and power as another place, a critical area to assess. We know one person makes up a system. Like I said, we are a collective system here today. Each one of us walked in this room on our own and our own individual world to create this collective world for these 2 or so hours. What we do know is that internal transformations lead to external transformations. So even though we're talking about this in this macro way and about the systems and community, we gotta check our own stuff first. Transformational leadership, that's a part of it. And the thing about leadership is it's so often looked at from this hierarchical perspective, right? Like, who's in charge? Who's at the top? That's the leader. But I would venture to that many of you in here are quiet leaders, and you just do the work. And maybe you're not saying anything or bossing people around, but that whole lead by example, that's still leadership. I know Karen's boss, and I've been using this in my own place around communication is not hierarchical. There's no hierarchy in communication. And so again, in this collaborative leadership structure that we are building, we do have an org chart, of course, because you have to, and we look at that, and also, there's no hierarchy in communication. You can talk to me. Just because I'm the executive director doesn't mean I'm not accessible. My work is to balance that accessibility. where am I overcorrecting because of whatever, and then I'm burned out and resentful, versus where am I like turning away and hiding because I don't want to be bothered. Like there's a sweet spot in the middle that I am continuing to find. But ultimately, leadership is an inside job. And when we can begin to transform those systems within ourselves, it can actually impact and affect change with your coworkers and the larger social systems. So that's the other piece, Tracy, too, is you've got to have people who have the power to make change bought in. And so whenever I'm doing consulting work with organizations, I always start with the people at the top. I believe in, obviously, I support direct workers, frontline staff, absolutely, but they don't traditionally have power to make change. And if they are engaged in power to make change, it's a big thing that they're doing. And often their jobs are at risk, their health can be at risk, like there's all this risk. So I'm like, no, if the leaders aren't engaged or bought in, you're not ready. What's the point? It's just like when the kid would come home, my kids would come home and be like, can I stay at so-and-so's house? They've already made this commitment to their friend and they haven't asked me. Like he should have started, my son, I say he because he always did it. He should have started with me before he made the plans. And then when my kids would ask me in front of their friends, it was always an automatic no. They knew that. But it is this process of the learning, being curious, self-reflection, being humble, humility, the vulnerability, the experimentation, adaptation, all these big words. I really practice vulnerable leadership. And if we're looking at this through the lens of anti-oppressive social work, we have to have ourself in our practice. The days of us being like, well, I'm just here to do my work and go home. Like, yes, you can do that, but if you're really serious about this change and being transformational, you get to put yourself in that. And that means checking your own biases, checking your own systems. What are the ways it's being impacted? I'm being impacted, or how am I showing up impacting others? And it's tricky with social workers because we're always taught about boundaries and self-disclosure and dual relationships, all those fun things we get to navigate. Yes. The mic. I love that you're asking for the mic now. Yes.
Thanks. Okay, boundaries and all that, social work ethics and all that stuff. So I have an internal experience with my clients and their parents, and I love them.
Sure.
And everybody's always saying it's inappropriate and it's not, but I love them in my heart. I think about them all the time, and that's why I can do my work. Is it appropriate to start talking about that?
To who are you talking about it to?
To my colleagues, my supervisor, I haven't talked to anybody about it, not even my husband.
We're all hearing this now for the first time. This is your group now.
One more thing I don't know about.
How long have you been married? That's actually the question. Right. That's so beautiful. But I think it's a big question, and I can't obviously give an absolute answer because I'm not in the situation, but I think what love, what's the song, all you need is love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love, all these beautiful things. And I love the people that I work with deeply. I'm in community with people. There is deep love there. And that fuels the work. The most powerful parts to me come from the softest parts on the inside. The brokenheartedness is seeing what the world is like, having love and care for people. And I think we have to love the people for whom we say we are serving and build those relationships, because that's where you get to that place of not on my watch, right? If I don't know you and I don't have a care for you and I see somebody like doing something to you, it's really easy for me to just be like, oh, they'll be fine. I'm gonna drink my coffee. But man, if I care about you, even if it's just your humanity and your dignity and I don't know anything else about you, I'm gonna step in and disrupt that harm. And that's that space, back to that space of resistance. It gets so intolerable because that love, that anger, the things that come up when you get that close to injustice, it doesn't feel good. I think Dr. Cornell West said that social justice is what love looks like in public. So I think it's okay to love our people, I really do. And love is such a hard and precarious word, which I think it's sad, because then we try to stop it because it's not appropriate. I don't know, follow your own ethics. You know what those are. You know what you can't do with your clients. I hope you do. Don't do it. Just don't do those things. But my goodness, those young people, when they come into KYC and some they get like their first binder, maybe in a binder or something to help with chest compression, and they'll walk in kind of like this. They'll get their binder and they walk out like this. My heart melts every single time. It never gets old because I love them. I want them to have that experience of being, I'm tearing up now. I want them to have the experience of being in the world and knowing they belong and that they're beautiful and radiant. How else can I have the endurance if I don't have love in my heart? So, yes, you hold that in there and you keep living that out in a way, because that's actually how change gets to happen. And when we talk about this as a practice, we look at shifting power. Shifting power, like that, power is a scary word. Most people don't like to acknowledge they have it. They don't want to engage in it, or we talk bad about those in power. Power is actually neutral. It's just a thing. It's the ability to make change. That's all it is. That's all power is. When the power is out, you can't turn the lights on. When the power is on, you can. It's really kind of simple, right? But when we engage in this work, we have to talk about shifting power. Let me dry my eyes a bit. I haven't teared up and got tender in a training in a while, so thank you for that. Because I need that too. It's so easy because of the length of time I've been in this work. It's so easy to have a shell, and you have to, because it's hard in your people's lives. It's so easy to have this hardened shell, and I've worked really hard not to have it, but I also like to remember that like my heart can still be touched, so thank you for that. When we talk about shifting power and doing things differently, sometimes it is letting other folks make decisions. Sometimes it is choosing what we feel neutral about, what we're attached to. My wife and children will tell you I have an opinion about everything. And when my team asks about something, I have to decide how attached am I to that answer. Do I think that I have the best idea? Maybe. But I don't have to be the only. No, I didn't ask you for all that back there. Fix your head, put your head back up. But it's a power shift in putting that in their hands, because if we want people to feel and experience empowerment, we got to give them something that, even if an individual level, is our clients, the communities that we serve. That's why having representative leadership is so important. When I first started at KYC, we didn't have any young people on our board, and I have been pushing for that. I think we're ready to start doing it next year. But one of the things the previous board member said was, do you want the youth voting on your salary? And I said, yeah, they should be. If I'm not doing the work I need to be doing, I don't need to be here. If they can't connect with me in some way, even if it's just to be like, yes, our needs are getting met, then I'm not doing my job. That's a shift in power, though. Another piece is we talk about being anti-adultist at KYC all the time. Adultism is essentially shunning the experiences and feelings of people who are younger than us because they don't know any better. 15-year-old comes in with a heartbreak. Oh, you haven't found real love yet. You just wait. No, that's really real, and that takes up a lot of space in their life, and we're going to honor that. And I'll tell you, I have to continue back to this inside job. We master lease a couple of places for our housing program, and it was a 22-year-old that approached us, wanted to buy these 2 duplexes. And I'm evolved now. This happened 2 years ago. I was like, no, what? That's like my kid's age. No, we're not going to work with them. And they kept up, and they kept talking to some of my coworkers, and then I had this moment of like, Erin, you say partner with young people. That doesn't just mean those that come to the center. That means those in the world. So if our age goes up to 24 and a 22-year-old's like, I want to buy these homes to support your housing program, why can't I work with that person? And so after multiple conversations, and right now 2 of our homes are owned by a now 24-year-old. But wow, talk about shifting power. Talk about checking my own stuff, my own areas of adultism, to think that I had no reason to think that couldn't go well, other than what society has taught us about young people. There's so many ways we can give up power in a generative way. So the questions that you get to ask yourselves, and again, you know, if we were in a different setting, we'd be in breakout groups and talk through this, and it'd be really uncomfortable. But like, what systems within yourself need to be transformed? And this is an ebb and flow. None of this stuff that we're talking about is a one and done. Because just when you think you're good, there's something else, another opportunity invites you into yourself. And then thinking of who benefits from the present structures of leadership and power. So back to your question, Tracy, is like how. This is how. These are the questions you start asking, or people start asking. Who benefits from these structures? So when we go back to looking at year-end evaluations, one of the things that we do at KYC is we do end-of-year conversations and end-of-year joint reflection. It's very social worky. And we do have the rubric with like the objective and the numbers, because some folks just, that's really comforting, right? They love it. Are you trying to tell me something? Huh? Thank you. I love you. We're very different, and we still make it work. Reflections. And so the end-of-year conversations are a series of questions. What do you want to celebrate? What was the hardest part? What made it easy? What are you most proud of? What kind of support would you enjoy more or less of, or something different? Those kinds of things. The member fills it out, they sit with their supervisor, and they walk through everything. What are your personal professional goals? It's about a 90-minute to 2-hour meeting with each person. And then the joint reflection has those numbers and like certain things like, you know, contributes to the work environment. It's still very generative, I think, in the way that we talk about those things. Then we've got our deliverables. But what I wanted to do was take out that fear of the needs improvement. So what I can do, if something is like contributes to the work environment, and somebody, let's say, is always stirring up something, because there's always at least one person, right? I used to be that person, like that stirs up something, and they think they're doing well. They think that that's what they're supposed to be doing. And so that conversation might be like, it gave you a 2 here. I really appreciate your ideas and the way that you're looking at things. What I'd love to see from you is to think about your delivery, because you want people to buy in. And if you're delivering things in a way that folks want to turn their backs on you, you're not being effective, right? So it's slowing down and having those conversations. End of year evaluations, they benefit the organization. They allow us to find ways to get rid of people. It's a deficit-based approach typically. And it's not anybody's like fault right now. Like, this is just the structure of organizations and businesses and workplaces. That's also how raises typically get determined, merit-based raises. We don't do merit-based. Everybody gets the same across the board, including myself. So when you've got power structures, back to that, we can't do what we've always done, and acknowledging that systems are the things that cause the harm, these are the questions you begin to ask and begin to strip away. Who is this actually benefiting? Same thing with people like write-ups. We do coaching and accountability support plans. And it's a conversation. It's not a behind the scenes written up. You get written up, and then you find out at your end of the year that you've got 4 of these. No, it's actually a coaching, accountability, and support plan. Here's the thing that's happening. Here's what we'd like to see different. What support do you need to get here? When should we check in again? So it's that conversation around that accountability. That's how you do the work. And remember, at the very beginning, we took time for people to say your names and what you do. Those are relationships. You have to build relationships. You have to find a way to slow down a bit. It's worth it. And when we talk about power, we can look at the power wheel. Who gets impacted? Who's closest to power? Who's not? And as you look at it in the different kind of categories, skin color, citizenship, mental health, you can see that those who are the closest to the power are mostly those who are part of dominant culture. So you've got folks who speak English, cisgender men, citizen, white, post-secondary education, able-bodied, heterosexual, neurotypical, robust, slim, owns property, and or rich. In at least our country, these are the people who are closest to power. So if you look at Congress, we know what that looks like. If you look at most big Fortune 500 companies, who's at the top, closest to power, that's typically what you see. And that's why it's so important in organizations to get people who aren't traditionally in leadership roles. Right,
It's really fascinating.
right, because who gets into those law schools? Another way, and I'm telling you these things because they're seemingly small, but they can be done to begin that transformative action. So I work really hard around credentialing for our positions. We have something open to only put a requirement for licensure and degree if it's absolutely necessary. So right now, 2 of our housing program managers are not licensed social workers, and they don't even have a degree in social work. But they've been in case management and crisis work for a number of years, so they have the experience. And I can tell you probably 5 to 8 years ago, I would have been like, no, they must be a social worker. Because that's how much I believe in us as social workers. We know how to do the right thing. And there's so much value. They're both queer folks of color. We need that representation in our team and for our young people. It was important to do that. So being willing to step outside of that box of like, well, this is how we've always done it is a really important thing to do. And it's so small, it's seemingly small. Nobody else has to know that we're doing that. They might not even notice. But we get a lot more applications, and that means our pool of candidates is much more diverse and deeper. Any other thoughts or questions around this power wheel? Makes sense? Part of your experience? With my team, we had this experience, this is a couple of years. COVID is really, it still messes me up from a timeline perspective. But one thing I noticed with my team is people finding their voice, being willing to speak up or have autonomy over the departments or the programs. And what we were able to name is our team is, I think 100% are members of the LGBTQ community. We're about close to 50% in terms of Black and brown folks that are there. We've got quite a few folks who are neurodivergent, a couple folks who are disabled, a lot of different demographics. And what we were able to realize is this is a group of folks who are not used to being asked for their voices, for their opinions, to be in leadership. So you have a whole collective system of people who typically aren't asked to be in charge, being put in charge of things. What do you think happened? What do you think happened? I mean, just there's not a right or wrong. They've all found their voices now, so it's different. But before then, it was really hard to get them to even ask for what they needed because they didn't know what they could ask for. Just ask. Let's start there, right? Have an idea. Failure is just information. Just adjust. But if we don't grow up in a society that teaches us that it's okay to take risk in that way, to be charged, to hear our voice. Like, I really love that you asked for the mic. You know, you started out not, and I'm sorry I can stop if you want me to. But you took the mic. It's beautiful. I was doing something a couple of days ago, and I was watching this young person in this training, and they were talking really quietly like this. Nobody could really hear them. Again, by the end, they're like, can I have the microphone, please? And they stood up to talk. And so to see that evolution, when you give people opportunities to thrive, to be radiant, to grow, they can respond. When you give people opportunities to make decisions and move from a place of thriving, you get these really wonderful results. So when we talk about being sustainable in our transformation, I love these people dancing because at the end of the day, this is why transformative justice as a framework and approach to social work practice is so important. Because you don't do the work, all we're doing is dancing on top of a bunch of BS. Is anybody here a gardener? Really, I usually get more hands raised. What do you do before you plant things every year? What do you have to do? Mm-hmm. 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 Yes, you're preparing the field. You're making sure it's ready the soil is ready. You're digging up weeds. I am not a gardener, so this metaphor doesn't get to go too far. But what I do know is people who are gardening, they also do the maintenance of pulling up weeds or other things to reduce harm to the plants, to whatever they're trying to see grow. And so we want something different. We've got to prepare the field for that. And nonprofits specifically, and we'll be done at 12:15 if anybody is time conscious, we'll be done by then. But in nonprofits, specifically social services, we talk about self-care all the time. But our places are not set up for self-care to occur. So if we're going to promote it and say this is the right thing to do, we have to prepare the field so that that can actually happen. That was the thinking behind the unlimited and flexible PTO. That's the thinking behind all the holidays. We're actually doing a staff retreat in a couple of weeks. We've got somebody coming in to do some restorative yoga and just different things so that people can actually lean into wellness. Employee resource groups, it builds community, it fosters belonging. Again, all the things we want to be able to offer to our young folks, but if we don't have it, we can't give it to them. And so, and this is where our transformative justice roadmaps come in handy because we can help places prepare the field. If you want to increase the diversity among your workforce, that's great. What's your current workforce like, and is it going to be safe to bring those different people in? And that's what traditional DEI work does, though, is it's like, let's just, hey, people who are different come work for us. And then we've got these great pictures. We do all the things to make sure our brochures are reflective. All those, and still, those things need to happen. But like what's happening in the field? What's happening in the soil? Can people actually grow roots there? And can they be healthy? That's the harm reduction piece. You're still gonna mess up. There's still gonna be oversights. I make mistakes often and I just own them. You're right, I miss that. I realize I have a blind spot when communicating with Generation Z. I'm a proud Generation Xer. And it just doesn't work well. And I know that. And so what I've learned to do is one, make sure the way I'm speaking is really direct and clear. But I also have to soften my tone just a bit. And there's a part of me that could be like, that's dumb, we're grown up. And sometimes I say that when I'm frustrated, but I don't mean it. But it also means I want to be heard. And so if I come up and I'm like, this isn't even natural for me to do, but if I come up to them and I'm like yelling or doing something or sounding too stern, they're going to feel afraid and not say anything. And that's just the truth. It's not even judgment, that's just the truth. So if I want to be an impactful leader and a transformational leader, I can own that, and I'm actually the person, I'm able to make that adjustment. I don't know what happened up here. And then the other thing that I do adjustment is instead of like with some of our all staff meetings, I have a couple of our directors who started leading it. So I'm putting other people, I'm giving them other people responsibility, but they also are able to help translate and so that it can be more collaborative. And so if I had been leaning into my ego, I would be like, well, no, I'm the executive director. I should be overseeing every meeting that we're doing. And no, because what was happening is I was just getting really frustrated. And then if I'm frustrating, that baseline crabbiness just gets more crabby. And then I'm tired and blah, 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 blah. My baseline, I'm in adaptive strategies all the time. This is, I think, one of the most beautiful parts of this is, I think I've said that 3 times now about different things, but we get to reimagine. And that's the invitation here. When you walk out of here today, we've asked about systems within ourselves, systems in the community, and the systems that are in the system. We've talked about power structures and who they benefit. We've talked about ways that white supremacy informs our culture, how it shows up. We've talked about our adaptive strategies, how those show up as well, and I invited you to even think about how that impacts the work you're doing. What it means to endure in a harmful way or endure in a way that's generative and sustainable because it's a long race. But ultimately, you have to reimagine what's possible. Glennon Doyle, is anybody a fan of Glennon Doyle? I shunned her a bit when she first came out because I was like, I am not reading a self-help book from some mommy blogger. Like, I was just not going to do it. Very self-righteous. And one night a couple years ago, I was like, what is her book? Warrior. Yes, that, but the one before it. Was it War? What is it? Love Warrior. Yes. I came across it on my, I was like, I'm going to read, I read it on my phone. I don't read books on my phone. I like the book in my hand. And I was like, this woman is amazing and she is wise. And I became an instant fan. And in her book, Untamed, she talks about the unseen order of things. She's talking about like our own imagination and that we have a view. The unseen order of things is how we know what the world could be, how the world could be more beautiful. We know that something else is possible. And that is what when I look at sustainability and even doing this work, being in this field, this is what gives me hope, is that I know something else is possible. And then my work, what I do, gets to be in service of that vision. That's our collective vision at KYC even. Like, we know that a kinder, safer, more affirming world is possible for our young folks. We know it because we're creating it. And because we're creating it, we can then offer it to other folks. And hopefully one day KYC won't be necessary, hopefully. But if it is, other places can offer that same kind of opportunity because we know it's possible. So we have to begin to reimagine what is possible, and then we lean into that. The unseen order, your imagination. I know you all have a different image of how things could be. And it's more than just complaining like they should just do this. Well, why? Why should something change? How can it be different? What's the benefit? Like, dig into that. So these liberation love languages, right? Because we talked about you can open the door, but if the conditions around it aren't good or generative, no one's really liberated. But you look at what needs to be reawakened, what needs to be relearned, reimagined, repaired, rebuilt. You can look at that. I would encourage you to start within yourself. Think of those things. What do you get to reimagine? But then whatever community you're a part of, you get to invite your community to do the same thing. And the invitation could be a very direct, hey, let's look at it this way, or just do it. Or get some other people to do it with you or for you. But let's invite our imagination back into what is actually possible in all of our systems. And then Queen Mother Audre Lorde says that revolution is not a one-time event. And the word revolutionary gets thrown around so many times in so many ways. Revolution is a sudden, radical, or complete change. And we want that. Sudden, I can't say that that's going to happen. I can't promise it. But it can be radical, and it can be complete. And Angela Davis says radical just means grabbing from the root. So we go all the way back to preparing the field, to transforming the systems, getting to the root, being a root cause practitioner. What's the actual issue here? We talk about homelessness. Yes, we should give people housing and make sure they have safe, affordable housing, absolutely. But what's happening that they're homeless in the first place? Trauma-informed care, when it first became a big deal, everybody was like, trauma-informed education, all these beautiful things, and it was great. But when you look at higher rates of addiction, substance use, substance misuse, we actually could be doing more preventative work in the early stage, actually during pregnancy. We could be doing more preventative work. You know that rate, like when we look at maternal and infant death, racism is the biggest factor. The impact of racism. But then so that emerges in high stress. A lot of things happen when a person is pregnant. And then a baby is born, and maybe they have a dysregulated nervous system because their birthing parent did as well. And then they're born into a home where they don't have their needs met, and then prolonged stress, trauma, poverty, all these things happen. Of course, they're gonna have high rates of addiction. And if you are familiar with the ACE study, there's also high rates of chronic illnesses and diseases. And those are typically amongst Black and brown people because of the impact of minority stress and racism and trauma. But we also know this impacts all folks who are not that little power wheel. The further out people get in that wheel, the more likely they are to have those experiences. And so we can be preventative. That can be that radical change. Just get to the root of what's actually happening. And then it just takes us all the way back to the very beginning quote. I don't need you to praise me for my resilience. I need you to stop creating spaces of trauma where being resilient is all I'm allowed to be. I used to say my son was resilient, and he really is. He had a hard time in education, multiple ADHD, executive dysfunction, and he knows I talk about his story, so this is fine. And he is so resilient. This kid, he made the varsity soccer team in his freshman year and hadn't played soccer since he was 5. I don't know how he did it. That's just his life. But he's also really creative. And he's really strategic. He's really committed to his own ideas. I used to always say to him, it's fine if you think you're right about everything, but most people don't want to know that you think you're right about everything. He's good. He's a good kid. And I want him to have an environment where he can be more than resilient. And ultimately, for the work that we're doing, wouldn't it be nice to be able to say something else about our clients than this, they're really resilient and brave? Yes, let's honor that and thank them for it, but let's offer them something different. That is what I have for you today. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Oh. I appreciate your willingness to do things differently, to engage in some practices you maybe haven't done before, and just your vulnerability. I wish we had more time to dig into some of these in small groups. However, we have a few moments for any questions or any other reflections that you might have. Nothing? Raise your hand if you feel like there's something that maybe you could do different leaving here. Even if it's, don't judge the size of it, just at least maybe one thing. Okay, good, good. And again, this is not easy work by way of effort and what you might have to withstand, and that's why you have to take care of yourself. Have that endurance for the long game. Be willing to be vulnerable enough to hope and to have an imagination for something different. That's brave work to me. Are there any questions or anything from Zoom friends, or have they all left?
I don't think, oh, they're still on.
Okay.
I have not gotten any emails, but they have been engaged. They're filling out the things they need to fill out, so.
Yes, get those Cs,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you to our people on Zoom also for hanging in there and joining wherever you are. And again, I appreciate you all and the work that you are doing. Thank you for being curious enough to think differently and hear new information. And thank you for the work you're going to continue doing. Have a good rest of the day.